I love the idea of people-centered leadership. So this is something that AME was involved in, and Lisa Weiss was someone who wrote for us and spoke at our events a few times too. And she just had such great examples of, you don't, it's not command and control. It's asking questions. It's, not even really providing answers if someone's asking a question, unless it's, very direct, like where are the keys? It's, kind of like, how would you solve this problem? Or what do you think? Or, just kind of making someone think instead of telling them what to think and what to do. I thought that was really inspiring. And she said, when she teaches the course, a lot of times people say like, oh, I wish my boss could take this, or I want him to take it. And she said, but that's not even, the whole point of the course is anyone can make these changes by just, being more collaborative and not telling people what to do, but just more inspiring them. And, she just had a great story with her son too, writing his valedictorian speech. And she was excited because, she was a speaker. So she's like, oh, well, we're going to do the best speech ever. And he was like, Mom, it's my speech. And so she said, she was like, oh, right, hands off. She said he did come to her and ask her questions about it and, just sort of get her perspective. So he gave like a great speech. Everyone loved it. And, people told her good job. And she said, oh, really? I had nothing to do with it. And she was like, well, actually, I guess I might have, when I just like laid back and let him come to me. So I thought that was just such a nice style of leadership. And even just like being a person in the world, if you're a parent or any kind of leadership position where you're trying to guide people and inspire people and help them, I thought that was such a nice way of doing it. It's the opposite of like, because I said so, or we've always done it this way. It's much more like, we're a team. How can we do this? So that was one of my favorite styles I think I've read about.
Yeah. So, okay, what about the reverse of that? What happens if you're in the quality, you see lots of, and I'm curious if you hear stories about people who want to point out somebody's poor quality, or if they're producing something and they're working with them. And suddenly, to your point, you mentioned about the fellow on the Ford department line who went down there, and that was a very amicable explanation and story. What happens if that's not the case? Have you got experiences of where that discussion didn't go well?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard people say like, some leadership like wouldn't get involved in like recognition events or like pizza parties or like anything like that because they're too busy. Really, then like no one kind of respects or listens to them later when there's other things going on. Like if you're not putting in the time to acknowledge and appreciate people, we don't have time for your new ideas either. So I think it's hard to balance because on one hand, you sort of empathize with the executive, like, oh, they must really have been trying to finish up and, swamped with
Mm,
other work and email inbox. But it's also hard to realize, like, oh, you have to step back though and think of your priorities and, get out of the office and actually go to the floor. And, in the long term, your work will be much smoother. You won't get so many troubled emails, people will take
right.
initiative on their own and, come to you with ideas instead of just waiting for you to, dish out your opinions and stuff. So
I mean, that's
yeah.
I think that's key. I think what I mean, reading between the lines of the editor's comments, what I'm hearing is relationships continue to be a major component of quality and continuous improvement and just general overall, quality of an organization, the culture of the organization. It comes down to the relationships leaders and employees are building with each other.
Definitely. I mean, it's so great, they say just like acknowledge people's weekends or, whatever, just small things, but people appreciate that and, feel seen and noticed and, not like they're just a cog in the machine, they're actually
Mm,
valued and they can just come to you with some issues and it's just much more like a better place to work. And then also like for everyone, the company does better and the person feels better as well. So
mm,
I remember talking to someone else at a conference. They were saying like, just picture your best day at work. You're just so happy, everything goes great. You come home and say, ice cream for dinner, everyone. Like we're gonna celebrate. And then your worst day where you're just overtime and nothing gets done. And you're rushing out the door, and it's you just want to give people the better experience. So I think yeah, relationships are a big part of that.
yeah, big part of that. Let me ask about cultures. I mean, you're a US based magazine. You're, I think,
Mhm.
in Chicago, right?
Yes,
Where
that's
you're
right.
based, right?
Hmm.
So, North America, you could even say, I'm in Canada, you're in the US. Even cultures between our two countries are different, similar because they're in North American. But what about how does your magazine support the understanding and appreciation that different cultures have different ways of dealing with quality and with each other? And continuous improvement?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely try to focus on that. And I know we do have like some regular British writers and German and some other people who've been involved in companies in Asia and they've, taken three business trips to China this year and, a lot of other examples. So I feel like that's always something we talk about too, where kind of respect people's differences and understand where people are coming from and different styles. Like even talking to someone about a call with a German colleague of hers, she just said like, oh, he really would like to know more of an outline of what we're talking about, and it just would have a harder time speaking brainlessly on something, whereas she said like Americans can just talk and talk. So, just helpful to know these things too. If people don't bring them up, maybe just think about, okay, this is maybe something that I grew up with that they're not as used to.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to quality, that there's a perception that certain cultures would have a keener sense of what that is or higher pursuit of that. Is that a fair statement, or have I got this bias? I don't
No,
know.
no, yeah. I mean, it does seem like it differs, and it definitely, I can see being careful about something because, of course, you always want to blame like a process, not a person. So
Exactly.
I remember being in another plant, and they said it was like an automotive supplier outside Detroit, and they said that big board on the wall, and it showed red and green for like things that were good and not. And they said you needed the courage to be read to show, like, yeah, there is actually a problem on this line. We need to look into it. And everyone feels bad, like having red, you want to have this beautiful green wall. But they said, like, that doesn't help anyone if you're trying to hide things. Let's actually address things. And,
Right.
it did seem hard because I mean, the day I was there was red on the wall, and it's like, oh dear, that seems awkward. But, how else would they improve or address what's going on? So,
I
yeah.
think that you use the term courage to show red. I think that's a big nugget of takeaway for me in what we just talked about, because there are cultures where, to your point, hiding problems is their quality problems and continuous improvement ideas is norm versus
Mhm.
exposing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like people would say, like, if everyone tries to paint a rosier picture for their boss, then the CEO is like the least informed person there because everyone's just lying upward. And it's like, I haven't heard about any issues. What are you talking about? So,
No, that's so
yeah.
true.
So,
Yeah,
so,
that's so true. And in the same way going down, right? I think, when you talk about senior leaders having a broader, longer range perspective on the business than the frontline workers, that communication around why quality is important, why we need to sustain the level of excellence that we're achieving for is because of the long-term vision versus just the widget that you're working on.
yeah. I love that it's, like so many defense contractors are always like, think of your brothers and sisters fighting and, like just making a whole community effort. And even talked to someone who was in the National Guard and he said like, and then he kind of went to more of a civilian role, but he said like you just really think of like when you're out in the field and something breaks, it's really a bummer, So
Oh
on the
yeah,
other
yeah.
end, he really thinks like I want to give the best quality to everyone out there so they don't have to deal with that and their day can be smoother and they're not, stranded somewhere with a broken truck or wherever.
Yeah, I have one client, and I won't name them, but they work for supplying parts to the Defense Department, and on their wall they have "Serving those who serve and protect us." That's their logo, and it's written right on their wall. So to
Yeah.
your point, yeah, very very
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah.
And it gives you
Uh,
such a nice sense of purpose too. You think like, oh, I'm not just on this line all day. I'm like creating a bigger thing. So yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. And I think that's the other nice to tie into quality, that the quality is not just for the moment, the quality is for something much bigger, right? If you're getting value out of this video, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit subscribe, and please leave me your comment because I'm always anxious to hear from them and I will answer every comment.